So hi everyone again in our third artist talk, accompanying the Why Do Reflect Sunlight Fuck You Albedo exhibition that reflects on human impact on climate and especially like climate crisis. And today we have Paula Flores, one of our artists. Hi Paula, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
And we will be talking more about Paula's work with mushrooms mostly, but also bacteria. And I'm looking forward to this part of storytelling approach in her work. And I would start just in the beginning by shortly introducing her through her statement. And by her own words, she attempts to represent the complexity of nature and our knowledge as well as ignorance that we have towards it. She treats themes such as immigration and the disappearance of native cultures, flora and fauna as a result of modern industry, the space these cultures occupy and how they've changed according to its commodification, making use of diverse artistic disciplines and a mix of organic and industrial materials. She creates a dialogue regarding the current situation between human and nature. Currently, she's studying at the Art and Science Department here in Vienna, and now we can start. I prepared a few questions, but if you want to say something in the beginning, maybe for yourself.
No, I mean we can start with the questions.
Okay, cool. So, first of all, I'd be interesting how. Based on this, like also from the previous talks, we've been discussing this relationship between art and science. And I would like to know like how this scientific research and data, or if it shapes like the form of your final artwork, because you're the only one who really has like installation in our exhibition. So if this is like somehow present in the creation of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it goes kind of in both directions. First, that the research or the data affects the work, and then also the work itself may affect like how I think about or interpret the data. Because I think for me the interesting thing about the mix of art and science, it's that it has a wider flexibility and just a wider range than if it's just art or if it's just science. So yes, of course it affects, like for example, in this case that I used mushrooms, since they are alive sometimes for a long period of the exhibition or sometimes before. So sometimes materials do matter, like in the making of, and sometimes I have to come up with different solutions or approaches considering when I use alive organisms, because I studied art. So kind of in art school, you just think about the materials as something that you can shape and you can work, and you decide mostly, if you know the material correctly, you decide on how it will work for you. But how I work with the living organisms, I also let them make a lot of the decisions. So it changes the materials that I use, because most of the time I have to use materials that also doesn't harm them and lets them live or live literally through the material. No, so yeah.
So then it's like nicely leading to my other question about like if you consider the like ecology of the material, like sustainability, or if you are willing to change maybe like the initial idea of a material, or like it can shape also like the whole artwork based on like finding out that it's not sustainable, or that you would have to like order it from somewhere and things like this.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm from a city that you can find very interesting trash on the street. So first, that's kind of my first approach. What I'm used to is recycling material, found material. So that's kind of the first, I'd say, ecological approach that I have towards making art. Also because I like the aesthetics of used material and degraded material. Um, but yes, definitely more with time, I have tried to look for more ecological materials, especially because a lot of the art materials, some are very toxic or some are very plastic based. Now there's many different options, and you can find them sometimes even in the art store already. But yeah, I think things require research or experimenting, which sometimes doesn't go too hand in hand with the art world and the collecting situation, that things should stay the same for so many years. But yes, of course, I try to find solutions to this, and I really like the experimental aspect of it, and of learning how to use new materials, living or not living, but organic materials. But sometimes there's a conflict within me because I am from an industrial city, and I do have like a natural attraction towards materials of this kind of, for example, reflective or metallic materials. So I kind of always have dilemma within me of my practice, that I try to change them for something more ecological, but sometimes it's a very aesthetic attraction that I have towards them. So I kind of have to have a dialogue with myself to try to resolve these issues.
Yeah, yeah, it is very understandable, and I very much like this idea of found materials and using found materials. But is it in a way, or probably combination of like really searching for a material in like your surroundings after you have the idea, or does the idea come out as an inspiration out of the material you found?
Yes, it comes out of the material. I'm kind of a collector of found objects. And since I was young, I mean, I like to collect branches and rocks and things that I found in the park or at my grandparents' farmhouse. And then when I got older, especially when I started art school, I found so many things on the street that were so interesting. And already, like for me, they already looked like something finished, basically, that I could just watch, old wood, or especially used old wood, things like that are very attractive to me. So basically, I take a lot of the things that I find, and if I like them, I take them into my studio and wait for something that I know eventually I will use it. Some are there for years and years, but for some reason I can't throw them away, and yes, I end up using them. Some, I don't know, 5 years later, or some quickly. No, some may take a week or a month, but yeah, it just kind of a living with them situation in the studio.
Do you also collect like non-natural materials?
Yes, definitely. I have, yeah, metal pieces and plastic pieces, things like really random things, just things that I like.
And has it ever happened to you that, as you were saying, that you need to also consider the materials based on how healthy they are for the mushrooms and for the like living part of your artwork? Has it ever happened that it would like harm, because you with found material you can be sure about the origin, and like used paints, for example? Like, what is it if it happened like that? It was like really destroyed.
Well, for these, for the mushrooms or the bacteria that I've been working with, materials that I've used haven't harmed them. Also, because the mushrooms, most of the time for the artwork, they end up drying because I mean, they kind of have a shorter lifespan, and to keep them alive, it's kind of risky because they are very, mold is very attracted to them. So it can also be harmful for the people around the mushroom if it's uncovered, to have mold on the mushroom. And if you dry them, then it becomes a material that can last for a while and without mold. So yeah, it's considerations that you have to have, but a funny part of that is that actually, for example, plastic makes it much easier to work with these materials because it's something that you can sterilize easily. and you can control easily, versus, for example, wood. When you want to grow mushrooms on wood, if you don't have a more controlled environment, or if you're not sure of all, let's say, all the things in the wood, you to quarantine the wood for a really long time. People quarantine wood for years to sometimes grow edible mushrooms. um, you have a more of a risk of infection in these cases. So yeah, kind of opposite, but a lot of industrial plastic based materials are easier to work with in these situations. But in this case, I use basically what is trash residue from kitchen, like plastic containers or Tetra packs, to grow them.
This very interesting actually for me, because I wouldn't like consider these plastic materials to be kind of like safer for the organisms. So the mushrooms you are using, are they edible all the times, or
Yes, they
like?
are. They are edible mushrooms. I don't eat them. I don't grow them with the purpose of eating them. So also that's why I can experiment a bit more with them, because maybe if it was for eating them, then maybe it's not such a good idea to use the plastic, no? Because I don't know to what extent the mushroom can maybe kind of eat the plastic, and then we would eat it. But yes, most of the time, or all the time actually, I've used edible mushrooms.
And based also on this, like we had artists like in the previous artist talk who was working more about like this creation of the material, like a new material that can be then used. But you are more using like the mushrooms as an actual like final artwork, let's say, like a part of it. So what is maybe we can a bit jump to your approach of like this artistic creation.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, in this case, for this installation, I used the mushroom as, let's say, sculptures on themselves. No, like I didn't want to change them. I do use it as a material. So just when it's the mycelium, the mycorrhizum, what is under the earth, and that you basically can grow it in a mold, and it will grow in the shape that you put it in. And then you dry it, and then whatever. So if you want to do the inside of a cup, you can do that. It's like any other material that you would put in a mold. But yeah, in this case, I wanted more the shapes of the mushroom, because for this installation, since it's about the global warming, or kind of one of our biggest issues right now, when I started to research what I would do for this exhibition, I wanted to know other organisms that basically did a lot of the CO2 sequestration, no, in the world, because we know about trees, and that's kind of what everybody has in mind of the trees are the best ones to do this. But when you go in a bit deeper, you discover that there's so many other organisms that do a really good job on this. You could say, I mean, if you see it as a job, which sometimes the words that they use, it's very like human mind, but and it's kind of hard to put other words into it. But yeah, there's a lot of research now that shows that mushrooms are the ones that actually fix most of the CO2 in the soil. So like it does come through the trees, but the tree itself, according to this newer research, is not the one that actually fixes it deep into the ground. They are the mushrooms, which is this mycorrhizum, all the net that is under the forest. So I wanted to have in this installation these organisms that help, that basically they eat a lot of CO2, and they put it deep in the ground, and it stays there, or it can stay there for hundreds of years.
And what mushrooms did you use? Two types, if I remember correctly.
Yes, in this case, I used the pink oyster mushroom and another one that is called monkey's head. And yeah, the pink oyster, it actually is pink and it's very beautiful in its color. And what I wanted to do in this case is I wanted to try to conserve that color. Going back to the material, I thought, yeah, why not look for ones that already have colors that are attractive to me, instead of after maybe thinking, how can I paint it or how can I make it have this color, look more to something that is already existing like that.
And they are like, their growth is stopped, like they're no longer alive.
Yeah, now they're not alive anymore. I dried them, and actually it's perfect to dry them now in Vienna in the winter, because the heaters of the inside the houses and the studios dry them perfectly. So it's kind of a double intention when you need to heat your place, and if you have the mushrooms exposed to the heat without humidity, they dry, and they dry in a very nice way, because the, let's say, the more controlled way to do it is in the oven, which you can use the kitchen oven because you need very low temperature. But the heaters here work very well to dry them.
And maybe now we could talk about like what is actually necessary for them to grow. Like, do you need like a lab? Do they need like a lab environment, or like can people do it at home, like in living room?
Yes, you can do it at home. I do it very, yeah, kind of DIY style. Of course, it's in a lab situation, it's more ideal in the sense that you can assure that more will survive and that they will grow like you want. But I don't like so much the situation of a lab where it's highly controlled. I like to leave this aspect of life to, to take that chance. And it makes me, even though it's a risk that I could lose all the growth that I have, but I kind of like that risk of not knowing the final outcome and not knowing what I will have. So it's yeah, it's something that, opposing to when you're the artist and you have all these materials and you say, yeah, I want the sculpture like this, it kind of is only up to you if you make it like that. But with the living organisms, unless you highly control it, you always have these factors of life that could happen. So yeah, actually it's very easy materials that you find in any place, and a lot of them are waste materials that it's very easy to gather. And let's say the hardest thing to have available is a pressure cooker. That's like the main thing that you need, which is you use to sterilize the medium that they grow in, because you do need to sterilize it, otherwise you will get a bunch of things growing, because you're just providing this nutrient rich medium. So yeah, the sterilization, it's, let's say, like the most lab thing, but it can be very DIY, and it's really fun to do and to learn this process, because kind of every time it's different, you learn something different.
Yeah, it's a really nice sort of co-creation with the mushrooms.
Yeah, definitely.
Also a bit like when you work with a computer and you have some like random algorithm that can like answer, but I can imagine it's much more fun with the nature aspects. And I wanted to ask, like, because the mushrooms are gaining like a much better reputation recently, as this like mycelium materials like muskin, for example, are already like getting into the fashion industry, and fashion designers are like really appropriating it for like design clothes and stuff. And then also more and more people are getting into this fascination of the fungi world, like the way they communicate, and how much smarter they are, and much more like similar to us, like to humans, that we actually sort of come out of fungi world. Uh, what do you think might help to bacteria get some like better reputation, so people would like see them as something else than something that needs to be killed immediately?
Yeah, I think that is beginning, because now a lot of the research based or research on bacteria is now very available, and like a lot of news websites like Normal News, BBC, or things like that, now they have these publications about the beneficial bacteria that lives in us or on us or around us. So yeah, I think that will help a lot to change. The hard thing with bacteria, which is I think one of the problems for us with nature, is that when we can't fully see things, it's hard for us to relate to them, no? So bacteria, unless you see an image or you have a microscope that you can see them with, you kind of can't relate too much to their lifestyle. So you can have information about them, but it's a bit hard to understand them. And of course, I think it also depends on the generations, because I remember when I was young, the idea with bacteria was that it was the best was to just kill everything, not to sterilize yourself and the house and everything. And of course, now with Corona, even though it's a virus, but it's kind of this idea of kind of an invisible world for us, and how much things can change to something that we can't see, know that it's everywhere with us. But I think definitely this research with bacteria, that it's beneficial for our digestion, and now that it's linked to being healthy in so many different ways, I think it will change our ideas toward it, and it demonstrates once more how connected we are. So all organisms are part of a healthy planet.
Is there maybe some specific story that you would like to tell about bacteria, or like explore in some future artworks?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why, since I was a child, I was very interested in them. I think because of this, they are kind of invisible for us, and I just found it fascinating that they could do so much without being seen by us. And I thought they just had kind of like this, more secret world that we weren't allowed in. And by that time, I didn't know that we had bacteria living in us or on us. I don't know how I thought of them, but I was just always very attracted to them. And I think something that I considered to study was microbiology. Um, and then kind of in art, and being in the art and science masters, it gave me this other approach, that I could go back to them, not just read about them, which is kind of where I was, just reading about microbiology. And maybe the closest relationship was within food, of like fermentation process and things like that. But yeah, this allowed me to use it as a material because of a course that I took at the university. But I didn't really know how to, like, I didn't learn how to do it. I just heard about it, and I thought I will try to grow my own bacteria, my skin bacteria. And yeah, I just kind of asked what I needed to do, and I started doing it. So it was very DIY. In my first experience, I unfortunately killed all of them because I exposed them to too much light. But it was a very fun process, and each time I did it, I had to learn something. But as I said before, I really like this DIY, not controlled environment. So I had them growing in my studio, which is a shared studio, and people were not too happy with the smell. And then I took them home. So there I was here in the Vienna U-Bahn traveling with smelly bacteria medium. But I was very happy to have them in my room, and my room didn't smell good. But for me, slowly I started liking that smell, and it was just fascinating to see the colonies grow. That when they come to a certain growth, you can see them, no, as in the petri dishes. So yeah, it's just not a particular story, but I have really enjoyed learning how to kind of coexist with them in my room, basically, and see them develop.
Yeah, I remember you once told a story about how you were like showing the the bacteria sculpture in some like foreign city and how it was like to travel with it. So
Yeah.
it is like a practical question that is it like much harder to exhibit this kind of art?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was in Venice, and I mean, in Venice, it wasn't the problem to take it because I went on a bus. But for example, if you travel by airplane or if you ship things, you have to say if you have biological samples or microbial samples. And I think actually I haven't tried it, but I have checked it because of when I travel that, you know, you have to check these things. And I think for some of them, you have to have permits and a bunch of things, and it depends into the country because, for example, I mean, I travel a lot to the US, and with them, it's especially hard to kind of get things into the country. So I think if it's by shipping, you would need probably very many permits to do these things, and also because they're very delicate, you know, because unless you have equipment to transport them, they need to have humidity and a certain temperature, or at least just not to freeze and not to dry out kind of in a basic way. And if you ship it, then you can't control unless it's in a special lab designed or lab equipment situation.
Mm. I have a question from someone, and is a positive thing for adaptogens, mushrooms, etc., to be co-opted by capitalism?
To be co-opted by capitalism. But what was the beginning? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Do you think it's a positive thing that they are being co-opted?
Yeah, I mean, it's a risk because I think a lot of mushrooms and bacteria, also as many other organisms, we end up using them for most of the time our benefit, no, and in the way that we want. So I mean, it's positive in the sense that it's an alternative to other materials that we have obviously exploited too much from the earth. But then it also comes into the question that they can become enslaved by us, and we like a lot of bacteria are already genetically modified, and that's kind of seen as something very acceptable because it's very scientific, and most of it looks very beneficial. And it's kind of hard to imagine what would the harm be if it's not to harm, like, you know, to directly harm, to say, okay, this bacteria will kill, I don't know, humans. Of course, we always think of ourselves first. Then we kind of see it as something not harmful because they are so small. And yeah, you know, it's so mushrooms, I think, yeah, it's the risk of these things that are smaller and that we think that as long as they can keep reproducing, it's fine. You know, if they can keep living, it's fine. But I think there is a great risk or danger that we kind of lose that life connection when it is used in these ways. Because of course, like to use them for clothing garments or for other like to use it instead of leather or things like that, even though it has a lot of great benefits, they do have to control them in a very specific way to get exactly what they want. And that means that also a lot of these processes can have a patent on them, you know, like for example the medium that you grow them on, or the way, or maybe even a special mushroom later can have a patent on it, which would be the most ridiculous thing. But I don't think it's to be surprised of, because seeds already are like that, no? So yeah, I wouldn't say that it's 100% positive, and it has a lot of risks to you basically to use organisms in this way.
Yeah, it's also like another question comes out of this like newest researches about also how sensible like mushrooms and like fungi world is, and today like nervous system is much more similar to ours than from plants, and that they actually like can feel the pain in some sort of way. And while we are still in this most general anthropocentric approach, we are still struggling with accepting like why we should even take care of the environment, or to really respect all the living, even within animals, that it should be like more relatable for us. Then do you think we actually will get to sometime to the point when we would consider how does the fungi feel so when we are growing it?
I mean, I hope so. That is kind of one of my main main goals of when I cohabit a smaller space with them, when I purposely grow them. Because for me, the most important aspect is to learn how to establish these relationships and to get to know them and each other in a different way, as if I just buy them or see them or read about them. So I think, to me, thinking about them and preparing, all that they need to grow and trying to keep them alive has helped me to try to connect in this way. But I think when you're living, especially in a city and in a very fast-paced life, and when we're mainly surrounded by synthetic materials, or if they are natural but we highly control them, like even gardens and parks, they are very controlled. It's hard to relate to them, and hard to imagine that they have these feelings and that they have this sensitivity, which I think it depends on the person. I mean, to me, it doesn't really surprises it doesn't surprise me. I think it's kind of like, of course, they have to have this to be able to create this connection with everybody, because mushrooms specifically, they are very one of the main connectors of the whole world. But yeah, I think it depends a lot of the place and time, if you're able to relate to them on another level. And with what you were saying, I think it's kind of, we have that problem still, that we know all these problems that we have caused in the world, and we know that we're on the limit of destruction, basically, of self-destruction and destruction for the rest. But we can't, it's hard for many of us to connect on another level, and we still see organisms as resources, or as a material, or as something to be manipulated or used in different ways. And that was kind of my approach on the work for this exhibition, that many of the organisms that I represent in this installation, and when I was researching, they talk about them in numbers, a lot in numbers, that this organism kind of equals so much CO2 sequestration. And so for me, it was like, yeah, but you're talking about this very complex, living being, and it's kind of reduced just to this number. And that's why it's valuable now, because now it will help us to take out all the CO2 of the atmosphere. So we should take care of them, because then we will survive, but not really thinking of the greater picture, or just seeing it as a very noble organism, another being. We still kind of have these reductions that maybe for us it makes sense, and it makes economical sense, to exchange one thing for the other in this case.
Yeah, for me, this is very frustrating issue every time I get confronted with this need to explain someone, maybe within these rational economical reasons why we need to take care of this or be more considerate. But I think now maybe we could speak about this storytelling approach of yours, and how do you think exactly, instead of this very economical, number data oriented approach, what might be better, or what would you like to, or what would you like to talk about more in your artwork?
Well, first with the storytelling, it is something that is very important in my life. And I think now that I am an adult, not a child anymore, I see how important it was to grow up with stories, which um, the main storytellers in my life were my father, my grandmother, and an aunt of mine. And my father stimulated us a lot in the sense also to make our own stories and to write our own stories. So I think storytelling, especially to children, of course, it makes you imagine a lot of possible scenarios that in our rational human mind they might be dismissed, but when it's in a story, everything is possible, let's say, no. And most of the stories that I was told involved animals. So stories or fables, which is like, learning from certain animals, that helped me to see animals in another way, in a way that it was just not like when you go to the zoo and see that how the tiger walks or what the tiger eats, or when you watch a documentary. The stories just allowed me to imagine worlds where, what if whales did this or that, or what if they feel this or that, or all these things. So I think storytelling, the main factor and the most important thing is that it allows you to live in other worlds that any possibility exists. And when you can open your mind to this, then that can actually be translated into our real world, our more rational world. So it's like a portal, no, to this other dimension that maybe we don't still fully understand, but that I believe it's there, and that other organisms are synced into it, and that we could be synced to it, but we have kind of this blockage um, of the rational mind. And a lot of this rational mind comes from this scientific research that now a lot of scientists which are sensitive to this situation, they also talk a lot about, this damage that can be or has been caused by scientific research. So yes, I think storytelling is very fundamental to allow us to navigate into other aspects. And in this piece for this exhibition, as I said, what I wanted to was to talk about other organisms that are, let's say, major components in taking CO2 and putting it away, which we are kind of the worst ones for this, no, because we're the main producers and we basically don't put anything away. um, and it kind of all started from, I was thinking, yeah, but how much CO2 do our bodies store? And if when we die, like how much CO2 could we put into the ground if our bodies would be put into the ground, of course, without a casket and without being taken all the liquids out and all these things. We were just put there naturally as other organisms when they die. And basically, it kind of doesn't even make sense because we don't really store not nearly as much as we put out. And with this, I came to the finding that, for example, whales are one of the best one of the best at sequestering CO2, because they live such a long life and they are huge in size. So they gather a lot of CO2 along their life. And when they die, they sink to the bottom of the ocean, and all this CO2 is deposited there for hundreds or thousands of years. So in an estimate, a whale can store about 33 tons of CO2 in their body and in their lifespan. And to me, that was just amazing. But it took me to what I mentioned before, that it is just then it's kind of just reduced to numbers. But this also is a link of, for example, whale protecting groups and scientists that know the importance of keeping whale populations healthy and thriving. This number is the connecting to the politicians and to the economy that make the laws to then protect the whales, because they convert and say, yeah, but if we let these whales thrive, then CO2 could go down, and this comes up in so and so value. So all the things that are represented in this installation, which is an altar, is organisms that can sequester a lot of CO2 and deposit it in the earth. But to show the lawmakers, they have to be reduced to this number, or not even just the lawmakers, for a lot of people to think, it makes sense, they are important. They have to have, like this label of how much work they can do for us, kind of, basically. But I wanted to do something where you could go thinking that it wouldn't be Corona times anymore, that people could be in front of this altar and think about all these organisms, the ones represented there and the ones that are not, and think about their whole life since their birth to their death, with which they take again into the cycle, and which we humans are very good at cutting this cycle. No, for us and for other organisms, we don't allow for the completion of it. But basically, for me, it was very surprising that even their death has such an important. It's a huge factor in keeping the earth healthy. So yes, that was a primary aspect of this altar, that as a human you could stand there and think, my body is not capable of doing this. And being an altar, which in the religious sense is somewhere where you can go and ask for some things, for whichever higher entity that you believe in. So for me it was, yeah, what if I could, ask to change my body in a way that I could also uh, sequester so much CO2, and when I die I would be able to deposit this deep in the earth. And so it's from this desire that if I could change my body to be able to do these things, but for now I kind of have to just think and thank for the lives of all these other organisms that have kind of these special powers to be able to do this. And yeah, and actually, aesthetically it came from a very interesting place that is an altar that extended a lot, because a lot of people go to visit. It's for a saint that is a child. He's like the child saint, and a lot of people ask a lot of favors because they say that he's very good and very holy. So in his church, and they do these little paintings which are called ex votos, and these paintings are on used material, and they're mostly on old pieces of metal. So a lot of people like cut open a metal can and then they make it flat and they paint on one of the side. And they are very they're all these paintings are from like normal people. It's not an artistic doing, and it's not something special, like. And so whatever you were thanking that this child saint for, or asking him for good health, or that he would protect you in a trip that you made, or blah, you would paint the scene, and you take it and you place it in this church. So for me it was kind of the same idea, because all these paintings that tell stories, because it's the whole scene. Like, for example, if it was somebody that was going to have a surgery, they paint the whole like the surgery room, and them being in the surgery, and the doctors, and all the situations. So you get a whole story in this little homemade metal thing from recycled materials. And yeah, it's just visually it's like a very rich history, because some of them are very old, some of them are like from the 40s, from the 50s, and they're still there looking very beautiful. And you can see kind of also the mindset that was from that time and how it has changed. And now a lot of people don't make these paintings anymore, but they take a photo, which is the contemporary version.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you. Thank you for also like explaining more the artwork. As I also remember that you don't like to like give out much information before the exhibition starts. Um, but on one thing, I like really like this approach about like transferring the data into a story and like showing through this to people why they should care. This like this educational sort of aspect is like very important. But do you think it can also like translate at some point to the way that we would like naturally care and wouldn't like need these reasons anymore, like these reasons that okay, we should take care of this because it's preserving the environment and we want to survive, but just really like get rid of this somehow need to kill anything that's annoying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the a lot of the problems is that the destruction doesn't really happen like on an individual basis. No, a lot of it comes from most of it. It's from huge industries that also the government regulations. They don't do anything about it because they produce so much money, and so I think to know about other life forms and other ways of living allows us to relate much more to them. And instead of, I think what we need to do now is instead of looking for what makes us different, is what makes us similar, which also the difference is very enriching, but to maybe relate in a way, because I think that's what may create some distance. Like, for example, with plants, know that for a lot of people it's hard to relate to them because they don't move in the way that we do, or they don't have eyes or things like that, and we can relate more to animals because they're more similar to us in that aspect. But if we know more about their way of life, then we might find some things that we kind of translate in a way that is similar to our life, or that mirrors some ways of being to us. So I think that's the benefit of research, or also of just basically living with them. But a lot of us don't have that chance because of the places and how we live. Know that we can't live every day next to these other organisms. But I think this I mean, when more people feel this way, then there is of course a higher chance for things to change on a greater scale. So I think that that would be the benefit of getting to know them in other ways. Yeah, and yeah, that's
Yeah, so maybe just because we will like we will have to end in a couple of minutes, but maybe as we were talking about mushrooms and also getting to this more like empathy on like a biological level, we can mention of course the psilocybin effect. And like this is one way can like all people like uh, um, on people like more level, but um, also in this field there is more and more research on the actual benefits, especially in the field of psychiatry. But at the same time, it's a very popularized and capitalism a bit from another side that if the popularity of this like psychedelic experience can be harming the scientific research or like acceptance of wider public of like accepting this as a tool to treat illnesses.
yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely something that I'm interested in because it's so vast, and it's I think this controversy has existed for so long, and this kind of mainstream situation happened already a while back in Mexico, which became. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people here know her, but Maria Sabine, who was a very knowledgeable shaman on mushrooms, and it became very mainstream because famous musicians were going with her to do these experiences. I think it's important to acknowledge that these these relationships that develop with these psychedelic mushrooms is also something I think necessary for life. Not saying that everybody has to do it or everybody has to have this experience, but I think in my personal experience and it as stories, it allows you to see other dimensions that you can't, or it's very hard to be able to get to them without the mushrooms. And I think that they exist for a reason, and for a reason they can make our mind navigate into other dimensions or other realities, or what could be perceived as that. Of course, there's always the risk of this, that if it's used as a just as a party, as a drug, no, as just something to alter yourself, then of course mainly governments want to ban it, which it is in a lot of places. They are illegal, and of course it does harm the scientific research in that way. But I think this goes hand in hand with us just being able to understand nature, and us also being part of that nature, and maybe thinking why we have always um as a human, as a group, we always been attracted to these other organisms that can take us to what would be considered some altered states of the mind. So why have we always needed them, and why have we used them for a long time of our existence, and why apparently we still need them in case of treatment, no, for some things. So I think it's a world that still needs to be explored, but I mean, the same as in many things, there's like the science sphere and the life sphere and so many other spheres. So I feel that they have to kind of come in contact, and I do feel that now science is a bit more open, maybe because of the internet, and we can read so many things. But yes, I just think that we need to kind of open or change our understanding of what is a psychedelic mushroom.
On the other hand, don't you think that if like the modern medicine would actually like accepted this, and it would like be implemented into like daily treatment, wouldn't it lose a bit of the magic? Like this experience in a way, is it taken like instead of like when we skip the like party culture and drug culture, and like it gets to this really like going nature, like really being in this like spiritual kind of like mood, versus if like a doctor in the ordination just like prescribe you some microdoses.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think it could like influence maybe negatively, or just like lose some of its effects, like overall effects of the experience?
Yeah, I totally think that it would, and it would also lose a lot of its ritualistic value and cultural value, because it has a lot to do. I mean, there's many beliefs relating to the mushrooms, and in Mexico, one of the main beliefs is that you don't look for them; that you kind of, they have to come to you in a certain way. And so that means that you have to be in the right place at the right time, and something has to cross your life, and something has to take you there. So it's a lot about a journey. So of course I think it would lose a lot of that, and also on the risk that sometimes a lot of the when things are turned into medication, then they can be used in excess, no, and of course it will lose a lot of its value in so many ways, and the psychedelic mushrooms would not grow where they naturally grow, then they would be grown in other in lab facilities, industrial lab facilities, and who knows if that would change what they give you in these psychedelic trips.
Yeah, that's very true. That's another whole point. But yeah, I think this exactly as you said, that it needs to come to you has like much more to do with our like resistance toward natural cycles of life. So maybe that's also the reason why it actually can be implemented in a modern medicine. Well, I'm really sorry that we have to end now, because this topic is also something that we could like I guess talk much longer about. But thank you very much for being with us, at least for this hour, and also for your contribution to the exhibition. And if you have something, maybe if you want to say something at the end.
No, thank you for having me. I have really enjoyed all of it, especially the process. I really enjoyed researching on this topic and working with it. It has been kind of a long production, or sometimes longer than I usually take. But yeah, I really liked working with you and with all the team at Improper Walls. And no, regarding the work, I don't have much to say, but I'm open if somebody wants to ask some questions through Instagram or through email. I would be happy to answer anything. And thanks for this hour. It was a great conversation, and of course, I could also keep going with this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. I was also very happy to talk to you, and you can on Instagram and Facebook as well. This talk will also in 1 or 2 days be available on YouTube to check, and you can still see the exhibition either if you walk past Improper Walls in real life, it's visible from the outside, or you can visit the virtual one at through our website or directly to Kunstmatrix platform. So thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the evening.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.